SoCal Filipinos presents Diwata Komiks featuring Mark Nazal, A Arciaga, Erica Juliet,
Hello. How is everyone doing tonight? I am your host, Maria DeLaGhetto, your favorite Latina Filipina. And I am so excited. First, thank you to SoCal Filipinos for having me and giving me the honor of interviewing the team behind Diwata Komiks. Today we have Mark AJ Nazal. He is the editor-in-chief and chief creative officer. We have Erica Juliet, who is the marketing and development executive, and then A Arciaga, who is the director of production, sales, and community engagement. So I think we're just going to bring them on. Hello.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hi.
How's everyone doing tonight? Are we feeling good?
Good. Feeling a little hyper.
Good. Amazing. I'm very happy to have y'all. I'm so excited to talk about this. I'm kind of a nerd, so I'm like trying not to fangirl too hard.
We're all nerds here.
Yes,
I'm sure you can tell my body of work has pretty much, encompassed all of nerd.
Yep. You have the setup. So let's just jump right into it because I'm so excited for everyone to hear about everything, what Diwata Komiks is, how it started. So I think let's just get to know each other real quick. So we're gonna start just kind of go around. We'll start with you, Mark. So first of all of you are very accomplished, so bravo, just saying. But Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where kind of you're from, that whole thing, and then we'll jump into like what you're doing and all that.
Yeah, for sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Mark. I'm, in theory, the chief creative officer for Diwata Komiks, but really, we're such a small collaborative group that we kind of like do everything because we are a startup. But, outside of comics, like I did have my hand in a whole lot of like comics related material, mostly for television. A lot of my career was based on a Batman-based show called Gotham. I worked on Netflix's Lucifer. We worked on Swamp Thing. We did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We did Charmed. We did, oh my God. It's one of those things where it's like too many to mention. Just Google me, you'll find it. But yeah, I worked on a lot of like comics related material. But I think really what kind of like changed a whole lot for me was when we won the Emmy in 2017 for Gotham. It changed a lot of my perceptions because like all of a sudden you have a voice and I kind of realized I needed to do something with that voice. And prior to that moment, I wasn't so involved within the community. But after that, I started to kind of like look into who else was in the community and I found Film Creative, and through Film Creative, I met Joe and Erica. So that kind of was a thing. But going back to your original question, I moved here when I was 17. I'm a third culture kid. I grew up in the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, moved to Australia, then moved here when I was 17. No, that wasn't last year. That was like 15 plus years ago.
I would say we look like we're between the ages of 15 and 45. It's awesome. So Erica, we'll move on so we can kind of like get a quick intro for everybody. Erica, you again did so much. I just wanted to point out something really cool. Well, I'll let you intro yourself first, and then I'll ask you a question. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I guess I got into acting and modeling out of high school. I was one of those people who like I went to Asia and I had so much fun in Indonesia and the Philippines modeling there. I loved it there, and I was so lucky. I got to live a good part of my life doing that. I got to model for surf companies and FHM in the Philippines, and it was amazing. But then whenever I would go back to LA and focus on acting, I really struggled with just my casting, where I fit in. Whereas in Asia, I was just normal.
Mhm.
So I had trouble with that, and so I studied filmmaking and sort of found the writer in myself, and I started to write and produce short films. And by the time that I met Mark and Joe in a writing class, I was starting to get my work in film festivals, and I was like, I need to make something better. I don't want to just get into festivals. I want to start winning stuff. And
Yeah.
we've just come along this journey together, and here we are today. We have our comic book series. It's pretty cool.
Yes. I mean, I saw like all the stuff on your IMDb. Like you've done a lot of projects. So
Thank you.
cool. So like one random thing I thought was really cool, kind of unrelated, but you like from a young age, you opened up the Mac store in Malibu. I don't know if it's still there.
Yes,
But
well,
that's
they
so cool.
closed down a few years ago, but it was
Okay.
really cool. I left that part out, but that's what I did. I started working for Mac at 17, and using that artistry career, it was my first big career, and I was pretty successful. We did open the Malibu store. I think there was
Yeah.
like 6 of us, and I was the presidents of the company asked me to be on the product development team. So if they thought about making something new, they would send it to me. I think I was sort of like the young voice for the company.
Right.
I got to work with all my favorite celebrities that inspired me. Obviously, I was in Malibu, but
Yeah.
they closed down. It's so sad. They weren't
Okay.
that busy. It was
Yeah,
more, it was a nice location, but
for sure. I
yeah,
just thought that was like on top of like all the like you started young with your stuff, you know what I
I
mean?
did. I did.
Like, you
I
know what? I'm
did.
just gonna go all out from day one. And I thought that was really cool. So
Thank you.
yeah,
I was really passionate about makeup.
yeah, I feel like you're just a creative, so it just kind of like all went hand in hand. You were like, oh, let's start here, and then you literally just catapulted you.
It was a way to empower me to just be my creative self, definitely.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you, thank you. So Joe, oh my gosh, talk about like you. So okay, community engagement, like for real, like you are all about it, and I really love it. Like it really is like just shines, and so it kind of makes sense that you are doing this for SoCal Filipinos. But tell me a little bit about your background, like what really inspired you. Like was there like a moment, or was it kind of like a build up that you were like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do?
Well, I'm your stereotypical Filipino immigrant. Um, I'm a veteran, a U.S. Army Desert Storm
That's
veteran.
right.
That's that was my first major career move, being in the military. And then I became a registered nurse, so another
Oh,
stereotype.
wow. You are the people boy.
Yes, I am the Tito Jojo or whatever. Um, but I've always liked writing. So I've been published in just your local little Filipino American newspapers and stuff like that. And I've always had a love of comic books and movies. And when you know uh, some of the things that I did prior, I mean during my career
Mhm.
is writing for bucketY.com. I don't know if you guys remember that. That's been a while. Also, serving on the board of Film Arts, which is a Filipino American arts organization, and I'm one of the founders of the Filipino American Chamber of Commerce of Greater Los Angeles. So I've always been involved in community, but there came a point in time where I was bored with all of it. And I on a whim I took the screenwriting class with Film Creative, and I met these two. So I mean
So
after that
cool.
it just rekindled all of the stuff that's been put on the back burner.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
yeah.
So did you guys all meet randomly at this in this writing class?
We did.
Correct. Yes, we did.
That is so amazing. That if that's not fate right there,
I
Yeah.
then I
know.
don't know what is. It was
Yeah, I
like,
mean, I always like to. I always say that when it comes to some of the friendships and how close we've kind of like gotten over the years, I would almost say that Joe and Erica were probably, how you kind of like think of the people that you would get along with, and
Mhm.
sometimes your brain makes preconceived notions of the types of
Totally,
people you get along with.
for sure.
First impressions, I was like, well, Joe's older, so I'm probably not going to get along with him. He's probably going to tell me like, Tito things to do. And then Erica is probably like super high maintenance. And it was so funny because it's kind of like the opposite from the truth once we kind of like got to know each other.
Yes.
Um, it was again, it's nice to be able to have like a multi-generational group of friends, but also coming from three different spectrums of our
Yes.
community, because Erica represents, first generation biracial. I'm immigrant but third culture kid, grew up elsewhere, and Joe's, immigrant but also came out here in the very early years of his life. And so there's really so much that we represent in different parts, and sometimes it really allows us to be a lot more fully focused in different ways, like between our
Mhm.
stories and our community engagement, and it also helps relatability, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I am biracial myself. I'm Mexican and Filipino. And but I was born there, but I came here. So I have a mom who was born and raised there. So she's very much like the more conservative Filipino. So that was a really big gap for us. But growing up in that that kind of background, it's so like you have your Mexican culture, your Filipino culture, your American culture, and then your Filipino American culture, where you're running around with all the other mixed kids and you don't tell your parents what you're doing, so you guys have to keep everything on the low. So it's so fascinating, the different cultural identities, and I love how much it's being reflected in your guys' work. So I wanted to ask, were you all kind of interested in comics growing up, or did it just kind of fall into place, like with the comic thing? Anybody
Erica?
can take it.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
okay, so I think the first thing I'll say is, especially in our current generation right now, it's
Mhm.
almost not true that anybody's not interested in comics. Like comics permeate so
True.
much of all of the media that we consume today, whether it's a TV show, a majority of the Netflix shows that you have
Yeah.
are comics based. Majority of my entire career on television has been comics based. So yeah, I would almost argue that even if you weren't a fan of the actual paper comic, you are a fan of majority of comics materials, because, and I kind of like wanted to point it out there for some people in the community that aren't aware, comics doesn't necessarily mean sci-fi or vice versa. Like there are some comics that are very much slice of life, or let's call it dramatic narration. All that
Mhm.
comics really is a more visual representation of a book. So it gives you a lot of different avenues to be able to tell more visual stories. So, and I'm sure Erica would actually want to talk about some of the other comics that she kind of inspired her over the years, but I know that you were a fan of different things as well. Erica?
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I was a fan with comic books. I really loved the artwork. I would just sit and stare at the pictures forever, and then I would try to read it, and I'd look at the pictures again. Um, but yeah, I used to collect them and try to study different characters. I was a big Catwoman fan until I found out Batman had a wife, and I was like, oh, no one knows about Talia. So I
Yes,
was trying
what?
to I know. I was trying to write a screenplay about her at one point, and I never thought. And the same comic book store that I went collecting all of the comics that had stories about her, we ended up doing a signing at for our. It was our first comic book
Oh, yeah, it
signing.
was our first comic book signing. It
The
was the
comic
Comic
bug.
Bug, and we'll actually be back very soon for our second issue, because the first time we were there was for the first one. So,
Nice.
with our second issue coming up, we'll most likely hit them up again and kind of like go back to that spot.
Yeah, and is that here in LA, Comic Bug?
Yes, they have a
Oh,
Culver
cool.
City.
Culver City
What else do they have? They
and
have Culver
Manhattan
City
Beach.
and they have Manhattan Beach. Yes, those two, and
Oh,
they're
cool.
great. It's like super friendly. They're also AAPI owned.
Love that.
The owner is, I believe, he's Japanese, but yes, it is a great little comic book store, and they actually have a section at the back of the store dedicated to indie comics and diversity.
Oh, that is really rad. Wow. I love that. So, well, shout out to Comic Bug.
Yeah, shout out to Comic Bug for sure.
But I
That's
never
awesome.
thought we would end up writing our own comic. It's just, it's been an amazing journey. And like, I just, I didn't predict that we would end up doing this when we met each other.
I mean, it's such a I love how much comics have really like just kind of what's the word elevated over the years, there's so much more to it. And I love what you said, Mark, about if you didn't even if you didn't read paper comics you definitely like them in some form or another.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
like Lucifer, one of my favorite shows, by the
Oh,
way.
really? We are the
Yes.
exclusive visual effects house. I am the director of digital content for the exclusive visual effects house that did Lucifer, the show. But also trivia. I was the lead visual effects artist in season 3. I was the environments supervisor and lead on seasons 4 and 5. So my DNA is definitely very much on that show.
Yes, and bravo, like the visual, everything. Such an amazing, amazing to watch. As I love the storyline, but like the visual effects and everything was fantastic. So bravo.
Thank you.
So okay, so question for everyone. Everybody has to ask Marvel or DC and why.
Somebody else start because I know I'm gonna say a few things. Let's start with Joe.
Okay, Joe, come on.
Oh, gee. I was a DC fan when I was a kid. I grew up on um, Batman and Superman, but I found that as I grew up, I started gravitating towards Spider-Man and all the X-Men and all that stuff. A little bit more like darker material, and these heroes weren't like perfect heroes. They were flawed.
Yeah,
Not well. Batman was pretty flawed, but you know.
that's
So yeah. Right now, gosh, it's a toss up. I love them both. Love them both.
nice. I feel that. I feel that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Erica.
I'm the same way. Actually, I'm one of those people when I can't pick between things. I'm like, well, I just love them both too. It's there's why choose if I don't have to? So I don't have to.
I like that.
Oh my gosh. But
No,
I do. I love them both. I'm the same as Joan.
So mine's a little more nuanced. And first of all, by the way, for everybody in the crowd that's like Marvel, I gotta ask you, are you talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe or are you talking about Marvel Comics? Because those are two very different things.
Right. Right.
Like if you're going to compare Marvel and DC films, that's a different thing than Marvel and DC, the comics. And I'm going to sort of like break that down a little bit for you. I'd say in the early 90s to the 2000s, Marvel was my favorite because of, the X-Men.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of them was, relatable, especially if you're an immigrant, if you're an LGBTQ person. Marvel definitely had more nuanced characters. But as of lately, one of my favorite series that I picked up was the new Wonder Girl, because I'm not sure if a lot of people in the crowd know this, but the new Wonder Girl is actually half Brazilian. So she's Brazilian Amazon. And the way that they represented her, they really did a fantastic representation, both visually and in the story, where you could really see the brown tones in the character. Her features were definitely non-Caucasian, and the storyline was fantastic. So I think, again, you definitely have to separate the movie versions and the comic versions because those are two very distinct things. Yes, you would think that they kind of they in theory source from the same material, but in terms of presentation, you have to give particular credit to the comics specifically versus the cinematic universe.
Right. Wow. You broke it down for sure. I couldn't tell you. But let's see. We got some comments here. It's inspiring that all of you are making an impact with the arts. Thank you for inspiring and representing Filipinos.
So
Amazing.
I do like that there's a Darna or Wonder Woman question in there. And instead of answering that directly, I think I might want to share some interesting thing later. Because obviously, Maria being half Latina, Maria, should I tell them the story of what I just told you or shared with you earlier?
Yes, I would love that.
Okay, so when I was in film school, as mentioned, I didn't really know a whole lot of Filipinos here, and what I wanted to do something that was culturally representing. So one of the first things I did in college was I decided to do a Darna concept short, but as if it took place in Los Angeles. And one of the, let's just say, one of the mishaps of that was I didn't know a whole lot of people who were Filipino in the entertainment space or in the acting space. So we actually ended up with a female who looked Filipino, but she wasn't. And she's actually more of, like Maria, she was Mexican in theory. Our features are very similar, but out of curiosity, would the team kind of want to see that?
But let's see. I'm gonna. Sorry.
Who's that?
Oh, I don't know who that was. Sorry, I don't know where that came from, but
No
continue.
worries. Do we want to see it?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's funny because I don't think I've ever really shown it to like a room. And quite honestly, I have no idea how many people are watching, but if you kind of want to see an idea for what Darna would look like if she was here, do you want to see that in context?
I'm down. I don't
Okay.
think I'm-
When I share this, does it share sound,
that I'm not sure.
Jason?
He's not sure either.
Here, let's try. Let's give it a try. So let's see here. Oh, it does. It does. Okay, here we go. Do you guys see it?
No. Okay, there we go.
Do you see it? All right. So disclaimer, this was my college project. I did this when I was in film school. I really was like looking to do something that was, Filipino in nature. But again, I had limited means because I was in college. And so excuse it if it's a little rough, but it does give you a little bit of context of the possibilities of what could be. Here we go.
Just when you think you have your life all figured out, something comes and shakes it all up.
Amanda.
Who's there? Show yourself. Who are you?
I am Dana, the grand champion of the Andronicans. A race from a distant world beyond your own, that now exists only in the silent echoes of this vast universe. Contained within this stone is what remains of my life force, and with it, all my strength. Take the stone. Become the champion of your people. And when you find yourself in the face of adversity, simply call on my name.
So that was a little thing that I did way back when.
That's right. So I don't know much about Darna. I only know like I just knew it was a Filipino superhero. So
Correct.
that's really rad, though. Hello, Mark. Oh, so we got a question. Do you draw the comic or do you create the history and draw the comic?
Well, actually, let's kind of like go further into that question because again, one of my favorite things or one thing you'll know about me is it's never like a one question answer. So the answer to that is I have some ability to draw, and I think a lot of us do. But in terms of comics, you really have to be selective about the style. And so, as far as the style of Carmina, I've always been aware that we had a fantastic group of people in the Philippines who, create comic art. In fact, Marvel and DC are very much known for outsourcing their art to the Philippines. So, long story short, in 2020, during the height of lockdown, we found um, an uh, an Esquire Philippines article on the Aswang project about an artist whose work I truly resonated with. We contacted him and really got along with him. And next thing we became friends. He started drawing Carmina for us based on some of the elements that we shot originally for the short film. And I also wanted to mention, and by the way, shout out to Roland Amago, who is also one of the co-founders of Diwata Comics and is based in the Philippines, and who is our primary artist.
That's rad. I love all of this. I love the just everything about like being part of like just community. I wanted to ask. I think it was so. I think we already. I think actually it was. Like, how did you actually become involved though? Like, what sparked? Like, you guys met at the writing class, but like, what kind of like? How did that lead into creating a comic? Like, where did that come from?
Okay, well, I started, delving into comics way during this period. In fact, it was the short film that I showed you, the Darna short film, that actually had me reach out to a lot of Philippines-based artists back in 2010, and I got to, know some of the abilities of let's just say the community over there as far as their ability to create fantastic art. And for Carmina, the story of Carmina really was it originally started as a short film that Erica, myself, and Joe conceived, prior to COVID.
Okay.
And when COVID happened, everybody got stuck at home. Nobody really knew what everybody was going to be doing. And so what happened was we were looking to pivot and tell more of our story. And as mentioned earlier, I found this artist whose work I really resonated with, and we contacted him, and one thing led to another. Originally, we were just going to do a companion series to the short film, but somehow, as we got to know him and as we got to know his abilities, we got very excited about being able to expand on the story.
Mhm.
And so one thing led to the other, and here we are.
Okay. And so I wanted to ask Erica, as a Filipino woman, I mean, you must like you relate a lot to this character.
She is the character.
Yeah, exactly. So what were the things that you directly pulled from yourself versus like maybe, I don't know, for just an example, things that you added that you were like, oh, this would be cool. Like it's not quite me, but I want her to have like tell me a little bit more as like from the woman's perspective, like the character.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, the thing is, like, the final story is sort of a lot of all of us have. It shares a lot of all of our stories. It's not so much just mine, but in the very very beginning, I know what I was trying to add is I always wanted to do a kind of like a superhero character, but something with original powers, and I couldn't think of anything, and that's when Mark came in, because he was so familiar with the Filipino mythology that I wasn't lucky like Mark and Joe, and I didn't get to grow up with that because my grandmother was Christian. So I went to church with her twice a week, and I didn't get to learn about the really cool mythology. Even my dad just told me now, he was like reading a book about that had, a grandpa telling the granddaughter about mythology from the Philippines. And he was saying, that he feels like it helps him to know more about himself because my dad's Filipino, because he didn't get to learn that stuff.
Right.
But I mean, that's the main thing. And I also, before I took this class, I know I thought it would be amazing to show something with women overcoming domestic violence. I had seen some of my grandmother's artwork on my mom's side before she passed away. She was a painter, and she was sort of telling me I saw there was like all these red colors and these trees she was painting, and I was like, what is this about? There's so much pain here, and it's so dark. And she was like, it's all the abuse that women suffer through the years. And it was just like a theme I felt in my heart that I thought it would be just cool to see women overcoming it.
Yeah, for
So I
sure.
think that's in there a little bit.
But I mean, we all know it's a serious problem, and like, who knows? It will. I'm sure that it'll inspire a lot of people, men and women. Um, so, so, uh, so you never got your parents didn't scare you with the aswang or the mumo
No.
growing up. You got lucky. You got lucky.
I did go to a Filipino church though, so
Well, they scared you enough.
they did.
What about you, Joe? Like, I want to hear more. Like, you are, you probably have more experience with that. Am I right? Like, hearing all the folklore and stuff. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, growing up in the Philippines, I remember I was like 19 when I came over. So, yeah, I went through all that. I was a Boy Scout, so we would go camping,
Oh wow.
and all the scout masters and all the people who ran the troop. They would tell us you were at the base of Mount Makiling, and they would tell us don't go past that whatever enclosure because there's a whole bunch of creatures out there waiting for you. And my lolo and my lola also told me stories about that, the kapre, the tikbalang, all that stuff. So it's not myth, it's not mythology over there, it's real.
Yeah.
On a recent trip to the Philippines, our tour guide claimed to have a third eye,
Oh yeah.
and that he could see when it's open, he could see or actually feel the presence of spirits. And we were at this really, really old structure at one time, and it was like that. I could feel the hairs on my,
Oh my gosh. I mean,
yeah. And then I had an experience when I was a kid riding my bike, and it was a full moon, and there was this big wings flapping behind me. And I was like, oh shit, excuse me. I just booked. I pedaled like crazy.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. It could have been a manananggal, or it could have been just a large.
Oh
van.
my gosh.
I
The
don't know.
mango.
Yes.
My mom, I told you I was born there, so when she said that when she was pregnant with me, she put all the garlic on the windows
Right.
and everything. So yeah, it's over there. It's real. They're like, no, we gotta take precautions. Yeah. So, dang, that's
I mean, it's really a lived experience over there. If you grow up over there, it's
yeah. She's told me many stories from like her
There's
family.
no-
and her own.
there's no separation of reality versus that. It's there.
Ooh, crazy. I like it. I love it though. That's probably where my horror like obsession and paranormal stuff came in. Like, yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I was gonna ask. I mean, the name I was gonna ask Mark, but like the Diwata comics, like it kind of was like obvious that this is what it was gonna be. I feel like you know what I mean. Were there any other like possible names that you were thinking of?
You know what? No, in fact, I'm more of the cautious one, like when it comes to like ventures, because my, let's call it, day job in the film industry is already strenuous enough, so I didn't really want to add another thing. And obviously, Carmina being half Duwata, we already thought like we should probably. I was already playing with the idea in my head of calling it Diwata Comics if we were ever going to do that, but I was like, no, I don't want to do that. That's too much work. And then out of nowhere, Joe messages me. It's like, what do you think if we should just create our own brand and call it Diwata Comics? And I'm like, oh god. I guess. But anyway, I did want to add something, Maria. The one thing I wanted to add is, Erica and Joe talk about some of the myths and over there. And the one thing I wanted to stress out is, yes, they originate from over there, but just as you and I are here, what's not saying they're not here with us?
Oh, I believe it. I believe 100%.
Right? Because I mean, some of my stories where I remember when I first moved here, I was delivering newspapers with my cousin in Orange County, and then my cousin was like, my nickname is Mac, so he goes like, and my cousin's Bisaya, and he goes like, Mac, look behind the corner of your eye. I forgot exactly the word he said, but I was like, what is it? He's like, there's a tikbalang on the corner of your eye. And I'm like, we're in Orange County. But I think back then, I was like, you know what? What if there was? And then, way back when, I'm not going to name places, but I ended up working for a certain place, which shall not be named.
Mhm.
And this lady was like, Mark, that lady, she's from my hometown. Copies. And I'm like, what about it? She's like, her family is aswang. And so the fact that people believe that is exactly what we're saying. What we're saying when it comes to our stories is we're not. I think interested is not the word I'm looking for. We want to be able to progress our stories because as Philippine mythology sort of like evolves on a global stage, just as you and I have traveled to these places, there's nothing that says our stories or the creatures from our stories didn't follow us here.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's really what the basis of Carmina and a lot of our stories are is it doesn't have to take place over there. It
Right,
could happen here because just as you and I are here, they're here with us.
for sure. That's some like American Gods type of stuff.
Exactly. And there I think that's pretty valid. Like no matter what culture you're from, it's pretty valid to think that the things that we believe in follow us here.
Mhm. For sure. The little comment someone said that when they pass the banana trees, they still ask like, can they pass? And like tabi tabi po,
Yeah.
and it's because it's such a part of like the culture a lot of the time. It's not even you even if you don't believe it, because there are things that I do that I don't know if I actually believe it, but it's so like out of habit
Yeah.
that I'm like, you know what? Even if I don't believe it, who's to say like there's nothing wrong with a little insurance, just in case. You never know, right?
I mean, it's like I grew up, as I mentioned, in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, and it was all high rises. And I remember being afraid of a manananggal crashing the seventh floor of our building, like in
They
Abu
fly up
Dhabi.
there.
They can fly.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So, we talked a lot about already about Carmina, and I'm super excited for my issue because I ordered it. Um, and the first, and then the second one's already coming out, so even better. But I also wanted to talk about Dara Hoog. Did I say that right?
Correct.
Um,
Darahug.
Dara Hoogs because that's based on Visayan like folklore.
Correct.
And my mom is from the
Oh,
from Leyte, so
so
she
she speaks Bisaya.
yes she does. So
So Maria, makasabot ka binisaya.
not really, no.
So so for me. I when I was very little, I grew up in Butuan City in Agusan del Norte, which is very Bisaya. I can't really speak it fluently, but I can do like small parts. But yeah. So okay, going back to your original question. So the one thing that we wanted to bring visibility on is you're probably wondering why did you choose comics with a K to sort of represent the company, and one of the agendas that we have as a company apart from telling our stories is to bring visibility to Filipino comics. Filipino comics, I believe, has the potential to become like anime. There's a lot of fantastic creators, there's a lot of stories that are very different. And so, remember the story that I had told you about Roland's original work? Actually, Roland's original work, we ended up publishing for the American market.
Oh yeah, I'm also looking forward to that one.
So I think, between Darahug and Carnal Tales, I would consider it's our homage to Filipino comics. To while we aim to progress our stories from an immigrant perspective of things taking place here, we also want to give reference to the original source material, and that's what they represent. They're over there. Their stories are based on some of the folklore that they've encountered in their lives. Like especially Carnal Tales in particular is very much the author's life story from her childhood.
Mhm.
It's important to bring reference to that and also give people an awareness of the different things that are elsewhere, because we're not, one of the things that I think we don't get enough awareness of is the fact that Filipino comics is a subgenre of comics. Everybody knows anime, people know manga, but nobody knows Filipino comics just yet.
not quite. No.
but it exists. And I think I really encourage you guys to, look for them online. Make sure when you type in comics, just type it with a Komiks spelling, and you're gonna find it.
Oh, okay. And I like the that you're not only focusing on Filipino per se, but like the other like what do you call it? Like the
The
different
growing identities.
right, because we're not just one umbrella type of people. Like there's I don't even know how many they call them dialects, but like it's like they're different languages. I don't understand Visayan. Like I'm sure that there are when I speak Tagalog, like I'm sure that there are words in there that are more Visayan from my mom because she probably throws it in there.
Yeah.
But there's so many languages. Like I don't understand Ilocano not even a little bit, you know?
Me neither. I like that would be completely foreign to me. And I
Right.
think what we found out, and somebody in the audience can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I found out during this whole process is with Bisaya being a dialect, not essential. Well, I think in theory, there's a debate now that says Bisaya is a language, but because it hasn't been officially made a language in the Philippines, there is no written account of it. Like it's more so spoken, it's not really written. So I reached out to one of my cousins who did grow up in a Bisaya speaking region in the Philippines, and she told me that none of her books, none of the things we ever wrote were in Bisaya. We just spoke it. So there is no way to gauge the correctness of something written in Bisaya.
Wow, that is so fascinating. So cool. So I'm just curious, what about where are you like are you also Visaya Joe or Erica? Like I like to hear about the different like where everyone's from.
My
Oh,
family's
I'm
from Pampanga.
Oh, I hear y'all food is
She's
delicious.
the best cook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And so do you speak that dialect
My
or
grandmother did. And then when I the second time I went to the Philippines, when I found some of my family that still lived there,
Mhm.
they would try to confuse me and they thought it was so funny because I
Ah,
was trying to learn Tagalog.
oh, okay.
They were like, ha ha ha, well, that's like Papangan. And I'm like, wow, that helps. I'm not
Oh
saying
my
it right.
goodness.
Oh my
Yeah,
God. Oh my God.
Pampanga in the
But yeah,
house.
I'm
Okay,
proud
look
of
at
my
representing.
culture.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And how about you, Joe? What is your are you
yeah,
where's your
I'm
comment?
I'm half Ilocano and half Tagalog.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, my
Nice.
dad's from Cavite and my mom's family is from the north. So I used to speak it when I was
Mm-hmm.
yay high, but I sort of forgot now. But I still remember. I can still understand.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of Ilocanos here in the Southland.
Mm-hmm.
So
Manong Joe.
oh my God, who is that? Is that Giuseppe? Is that you, Giuseppe? Oh, it's Jason. Well,
Very
I would be a Manong definitely over there.
well. Okay, so mano means the same thing as kuya, or is
Older
it
No.
brothers. Yeah, yeah. Kuya.
older? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
I didn't
it's
know exactly.
yeah, but there's also a term because of the people who came over here as field workers back in the 20s.
Uh huh.
So they're also called manongs. So there's
Oh,
sort of two uses. In the
got it.
Philippines, yeah, when the Philippines, when you say manong, that's older brother.
Okay.
But it could also mean the manongs from DeLaGhetto who
Yeah,
were,
I
yeah,
lived there for a year when I was a kid.
oh, yeah, yeah. So definitely a manong.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, so I wanted to touch a little bit on so at Comic Con in San Diego, you guys recently announced a new original title, The Hidden World of Anton Jimenez. I don't think we mentioned that yet on here. We did talk a little bit off
Mhm.
camera about it, and I'm really excited for that one. So what can we expect from this series? Like tell the viewers what's in store.
Okay. So the hidden world of Anton Jimenez, I think, is a little different from Carmina in the sense that the character itself is not special. Anton is an immigrant. He actually comes to the United States as an international student, and he finds himself in a magic school that actually gets his sponsorship paperwork done. Spoiler alert,
I
but
already
it'll be
love it.
there. But he's a queer character. He's a third culture kid as well. But I think overall, instead of kind of going with the Philippine mythology for Anton, one of the things that I wanted to do with Anton is really kind of represent who we are as a community here. In fact, I'll do a little preview that not a whole lot of people have seen. In fact,
Oh snap!
we pretty much just completed it, as far as as far as the artist and I. The thing that kind of like keeps Anton like apart really is Anton is a closer representation to the friends and family that we have from different backgrounds, whereas Carmina's story kind of like takes place in a smaller isolated town. Anton takes place in like Hollywood.
Oh, I love
So so a lot of it is really going to be reflective of that. Maybe obviously an exaggerated version thereof. But here, let me try to see if I can pull it. But feel free to talk to somebody else in the meantime.
Joe, your Fountain of Youth secret. I think maybe Anton's story of magic is a little more fact than fiction. He's like, I'm not telling nobody. That's that good skin. You know what I'm saying? Like I said earlier, between the ages of 15 and 45, you'll never know. But okay. I have a really intense skincare regimen that I do.
The secret's hanging out with young people like you guys.
That's true. I
Okay.
believe that.
So let me share what I was going to share. And for everybody in SoCal Filipinos, you get a first look of the final cover for The Secret World of Anton Jimenez. And it is illustrated by queer Filipina Canadian Gani Cabezas. So here is our work in progress. And as you can see, Anton's world really does reflect the different friends we make when we're here.
So cute.
But I think what's important for me in terms of Anton is we want to normalize our names. Like, for instance, everybody knows Percy Jackson and the Olympians. But what we're not really seeing in a whole lot of popular media is the normalization of our names. Like, we want to normalize names like Anton Jimenez, like Carmina. Those are really powerful statements to be able to put those in a title. I don't think it's been kind of like overwhelming to see some comments from readers who were like finding this comic book was like getting that keychain for the kid whose name was never in those keychains because we're also specifically ethnic. And so again, there's a power in putting your name out there, and that's really the reason for me wanting to put Anton's name there, because spoiler alert, it is a disambiguation of my name. Like, Jimenez is my mother's maiden name.
I love it. Love that. Okay, so I'm excited for these series. I'm excited. I want to read all of the comics. They're so like I just love all of it. I've always been into the very like the folklore, especially like the creepy folklore, like all that stuff. Thank my mom for scaring me with the mumu and the manananggal. So I think it kind of, you already kind of answered this, but like, why is it so important that you highlight stories from your Filipino American heritage? Like, aside from like, I guess representation, like delve in a little bit more. Like, what are you aiming for? What is like the end game for that?
I think, okay, so here's an example, right? Let's talk Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday, everybody was wanting to say that people should support it because it's Filipino American. But I almost argue that it is one part of our community. It is not the entirety of our community.
Right.
So in being able to share the different stories that we're able to share in the comics, we're not representing one part of our community. We're representing different stories of different parts of that, because just as you have somebody who grew up in that big Filipino family in the Bay Area, you might also have that lone immigrant that came here by himself who had to start a life and not really know anybody in Los Angeles, and really got to know the different folks and got to connect with, people who are Mexicans because he didn't know anybody. That's talking from experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be okay for us to normalize the fact that our stories differ. Like, you have the story of, maybe, like, for instance, one of my favorite films to date that represents us is Yellow Rose, and that's a very different story because it takes place in Texas of a Filipina girl who wanted to be a country singer. Like, that's a very different part of our community. And again, maybe perhaps the goal of people within our sphere of influence in different media is to not just showcase one part of our story, but to showcase the variety of our stories, because not all of us have the same story.
Right. Absolutely. Joe, what are you thinking? What do you got? Do you have anything to add on that?
Well, we didn't really start out to be a publishing house. Actually, we started with Carmina Beginnings. Well, we started with a short film first, and then the comic book came. But the more uh, the more we look at where we're going to showcase our material, the more we found out that nobody's out there publishing our stories. Nobody's out there championing our stories. And that's why, that's when Mark and I and Erica started talking about, well, we should just be the publishers. We so we brought Roland Amalgo's stories to the mainland, to the
Yeah.
main, and now Dara Hoog. So we have four titles, and we're not stopping there.
Yes.
And at the most basic, we want to tell more stories.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of expand on what Joe said. Nobody's telling their stories, but I want to go into a more nuanced thought to that. Nobody's telling our stories from our eyes. The reason I say that is because you could kind of like argue that there are Filipino characters in different media, but really take a look at the tone, how they're represented, the things they say, the language they speak, or like I think one of the things that we intend to do with Diwata Comics is we wanted to be able to also showcase um, our different languages, whether that's Tagalog or Bisaya, within the pages of the books, with obviously English translations, because it's important for people of different cultures to be able to see, written words and be able to read that and be able to identify words. And, you could Google Translate anything these days. So there really isn't an excuse to have, say, Tagalog words within a comic book where a character, in theory, is speaking in Tagalog. Translations are there for everybody to understand. And what I've found is, as we've gained fans from both the community and outside the community, people actually value the fact that they're able to read a different language because it's interesting to know that. And for me, based on my background, like in Anton Jimenez, you're gonna see some Arabic reflected in that because I grew up with that.
I love that. I love that. So I wanted to ask, do you guys have, I'll start with Erica. Of the stories that you've heard, like the folklore, is there any particular one that's your favorite thus far? Like any of the folklore or that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, Maria McKeeling is pretty cool. Oh gosh. I'm still learning. I still have a lot to learn. I know. I mean, just in general, I know I remember a big mermaid fan. I mean, I don't know if I have a favorite. I think just the whole world of it is just so cool to me.
For sure. I love that. How about you, Joe? Any favorites in there?
I don't want to give away something that we're working on, but I I like the tikbalangs and the capres, you know, um, and we might be working on something
I'm
that's
excited.
gonna touch on those things.
Yeah.
And we're and Mark's gonna explain this better than I can, but we're not Trece. At the conventions they're always saying, "Is this the one that's like on Netflix?" It's like, no, it's not.
There's more than that.
There's more than that, right?
Like
And those stories are based over there, so
Yeah.
we're telling our stories from
A Filipino American perspective.
a Filipino American perspective. Yes.
Like we're here, like all of us in this group.
Absolutely. And so, Mark, you are obviously like versed in the folklore. What is there one that you're just like, that's my
You know what? It's I'm going to put this in the category of too many to mention. Like for one, I'd say the Diwata myth is a clear one since we chose it as our name, but the Diwata myth is also very malleable in so many senses. What I say that is you could kind of like argue that some of the superheroes were maybe Diwatas because maybe they were gods, and also Diwatas throughout the years changed within the Philippine mythology sphere. Like before the Spanish came, they were more gods, and then when the Spanish came, the Spanish tried to sort of reduce the power of the beliefs of the people, so they made them more into like superstitious wood elements or wood nymphs. So there are different interpretations of it, but I do think that it's a wide ranging um, mythology, and there's so many ways you can play with that from different perspectives. But the other thing that I do want to touch on is maybe not necessarily from a mythological perspective, but the fact that there is magic in the world, period. And that's actually where Anton's story comes from, is the belief that there is a sense of magic in this world that doesn't necessarily come from mythology, but it's just a part of the world in general.
I love it. I love it. So we have about 4 minutes left. So I do want to just ask final question. Like, what are your final thoughts? Like, what is your guys' vision for Diwata Comics? Like in the long run, in the end game, like whatever. Like, what's like your the long term? Like, is there something like I don't know? Do you want to be
Oh
like
yeah, absolutely. I think
house or where?
well, the long term game is comics serve to tell one part of the story, but comics come alive in film. So when people ask, when Giuseppe was like, "Is there a film?" I'm like, "Yeah, actually." Issue number 2 of Carmina is a direct mirror of the film in development. Like you will find certain shots, like this shot right here, is exactly. Let's see here, this frame right here. So I don't want to spoil it for people too much, but we want to be able to start with the comics to build a fan base, to build identifiable characters. But in the long term, you want to be able to see those in other medium as well, whether that's film or in animation even. And considering film is our background, that's an easy give.
Yeah. And Erica, are you thinking maybe you're gonna play perhaps Carmina one day or
She
another?
is.
Yes, yes, yes. I did. I played her. I helped
I
create
missed that part.
her.
I'm so sorry.
No, she
Oh,
is like
it's
right
not out
there.
yet. It's in post production, so it's not out yet.
There's Erica's
There's
Carmina.
Erica.
Okay. Yeah, I got the AKC. I couldn't see. Can't see the detail, but I'm excited for the movie and I'm excited to see you. That's
Thank
so
you.
rad. So I'm sure you're excited for all the other like what you're gonna expand on aside from Carmina, right? Like I'm sure there's other things. How about you, Joe? Any final thoughts on like where Diwata Comics will go?
Well, I'm just glad to be in the company of these two here. They are the main creative forces.
No,
Uh,
no, no, that is so not true because your character is coming,
oh,
and
okay.
that character is going to speak to a very different audience.
Oh, I am excited. Oh my gosh. This is so
I
cool. Go
I
ahead.
just I just want to see the Wata comics expand more into the mainstream, and
Yes.
if that includes a distribution deal, okay,
Well, we're
throw it
building the
out to
fan
the
base,
universe.
so make sure to start following all of our socials.
Absolutely. Already doing it. I'm very excited to tell all my friends, Filipino and non-Filipino. 'Cause
Yes, definitely everyone, because it
yes,
takes everyone to be fans of something for it to reach that level of mainstream.
definitely. I want it to be normalized. I don't want it to be, oh, it's a Filipino comic.
Exactly. You don't want it to be that. You want it to be a comic that has a Filipino character who is the main central character in the front.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, oh my gosh. Thank you so much, y'all. This has been so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time, for all of the creative, like all of this. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm excited to see what's coming out, what's in store for Diwata Comics. Let's mention where your next event is. And then mention like socials and all of that. So did you want me to plug in. I'm just gonna do it. I'll start. So you guys are gonna be at LA Comic Con in December, and then you are also gonna be at the Festival of Filipino Arts convention on September 3rd. At, I forgot the place. What was it called?
FSAC, that's Festival of Philippine Arts and Culture at Levitt Pavilion, MacArthur Park,
Okay, perfect.
September 3rd.
Wonderful.
And last but not least, for our fans in the Bay Area, and I wanted to kind of like give a shout out, especially for the online orders when Carmina came out, 80% was from the Bay Area as far as the online orders. So we're actually going to the 6th Filipino American International Book Festival at the San Francisco Main Library on October 15 and 16.
Love it. Love it. Oh my gosh. And then, okay, there's the social.
There we go.
Diwata
Social.
Komiks, okay. And then you're welcome to plug.
DiwataComics.com. You can go to DiwataComics.com and order your copies.
Or honestly, just come and see us because you're probably going to want to have some conversations and get those copies signed.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you again. I can't wait to see you guys in person, and I can't wait for my issue to come in. And then, yeah, we'll see you again soon. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Thanks, everybody.
Remix